Miranda Lambert's story begins under the endless Texas sky, where tumbleweeds roll and dreams stretch as far as the horizon. Long before she stood center stage at sold-out arenas, Miranda lived in a modest farmhouse just outside Longview, Texas, with her younger sister, Amanda, and their parents, Rick and Bev Lambert. Music pulsed through the walls of that house. Rick's guitar strumming late into the night, Bev's humming in the kitchen as she fixed dinner, and the two girls dancing barefoot on the linoleum floor. From a young age, Miranda felt the tug of something larger than small-town life. She could feel it in her fingertips every time she strummed her first guitar, a hand-me-down from her grandfather. Yet, woven into that sense of promise was an undercurrent of vulnerability she would carry with her into every performance, every heart-shattering lyric. She was just 8 years old when her parents' marriage started to fray. Rick and Bev, once the picture of small-town stability, fell prey to the pressures of health issues and financial strain. Rick's back problems, a result of years spent working the land, kept him in and out of the hospital. Prestige and comfort gave way to medical bills and sleepless nights. Becky glued the family together with quiet determination, but as cracks formed in their marriage, Miranda absorbed the tension like a sponge. Even as she won local talent contests, her voice pure and powerful, she carried with her a silent ache. The girl making crowds cheer was learning early that applause couldn't heal a broken home. By age 12, Miranda's parents divorced. Their split was as amicable as it could be, but divorce in a community where generations clung to tradition felt like a seismic shock. School hallways buzzed with gossip. Friends had whispered questions. Miranda found sanctuary in songwriting. She poured her confusion, her longing for unity, and her budding dreams into two-line verses scribbled in notebooks. Every word dripped with sincerity, yet beneath the hopeful melody lay a sadness she couldn't outrun. The girl who wore her first pair of rhinestone boots at 13 carried a heart bruised by loss. Those early years in East Texas set the stage for what was to come. At 14, she convinced her mother to let her audition for a nighttime showcase in Tyler, Texas. She stood under harsh spotlights in front of a small but critical crowd, singing an impossibly mature rendition of Loretta Lynn's "Don't Come Home Drinking Ellis" with "Lovin' on Your Mind." It was as if the ache she felt lent her voice its haunting texture. Within minutes, local talent managers whispered in her ear, and a new chapter began. But every step toward Nashville, a place she'd only seen in magazines, was also a step away from the innocence she knew. The promise of stardom carried with it an unspoken warning. Success demands sacrifice, and every tear she shed onstage would be watched by millions. At 17, Miranda packed her life into a dusty U-Haul and drove 600 miles to Nashville with her guitar, her notebooks, and one suitcase of clothes. The city was everything and nothing like she'd imagined. Neon, lit honky-tonks lined Broadway, and songs poured from speakers at every turn. There were also rejection letters from publishing houses, nights spent sleeping on couches of strangers, and days filled with nervous auditions. Her first winter in Music City was brutally cold. Nothing like Texas, yet she shivered more from uncertainty than from the weather. Rejection stung. Great voice, but we're looking for something different. You're talented, but not quite what we need. With each no, Miranda retreated further into her songwriting, determined that if Nashville wouldn't open doors, her songs would. She found an unlikely ally in a tiny publishing office on Music Row. The owner, a seasoned songwriter named Tom, heard one of Miranda's demos floating through the building. He tracked her down at a coffee shop off McGavock Street and offered her a co-writing session. It was the lifeline she'd been waiting for. Their first collaboration, a heart-tugging ballad about home and belonging, landed in the hands of an up-and-coming artist on tour. When it climbed the charts, Miranda felt validation, but also a new anxiety. Would her own voice ever get the same chance? Even amidst small victories, doubt lurked in her mind. By 19, she'd signed her first record deal. She stepped into the studio, a place as sacred as any church she'd known, determined to etch her truth onto every track. But studio time was expensive, and the label urged her to shape her sound to fit trends, more pop hooks, less grit. Miranda balked. She remembered her grandmother's words, "Stay true to what you feel." With each lyric, she remembered the farmhouse living room where she first penned songs about heartbreak and hope. The tension between authenticity and commercial appeal would become a recurring battle. In those early demos, one song stood out, a raw, unfiltered account of adolescent pain, stitched together with gritty guitar riffs and a chorus that soared. The label hesitated. Miranda insisted it be the lead single. When it dropped, radio stations spun it nonstop. Suddenly, the girl with the Texas twang found herself crossing off milestones: first top 40 hit, first sold-out show, first awards nomination. But as the world cheered, Miranda felt a quiet dread settle in her chest. Success tasted sweet, but it left a lasting ache, a reminder of everything she had sacrificed to get there. Just as Miranda was learning to reconcile her public triumphs with her private longing, fate pulled her into the spotlight of something even brighter: love. In 2011, behind the scenes of Coach's battle rounds on The Voice, she first locked eyes with country star Blake Shelton. Their chatter backstage was playful at first. A quick joke here, a wink there. But beneath the banter lay an undeniable spark. It was a collision of two worlds, Shelton's easygoing swagger and Miranda's guarded intensity. No one saw it coming. Overnight, they went from friendly rivals to country music's newest power couple, capturing headlines and fan imaginations alike. The world couldn't get enough of their chemistry. The stolen moments onstage between duets and the candid selfies that flooded social media. It felt like destiny. By the time Blake dropped to one knee under a canopy of oaks at Shelton Farm in Tishomingo, Oklahoma, the world cheered. They called it the perfect pairing, two voices that complemented each other, two hearts that beat in sync. Their December 2011 wedding in Bourne, Texas was an intimate affair: white rose petals, country gospel hymns, and a guest list made up of close friends and family. In that moment, Miranda stood at the altar, radiant in lace and crystal, certain she'd found her forever. The truth behind the scenes was far more complicated. As the newlyweds crisscrossed the country on joint tours, the honeymoon glow gave way to the realities of life on the road. Every red-eye flight, every hotel carpet, every empty backstage dressing room began to feel like a test. Miranda, who had once thrived in solitary songwriting sessions, struggled with the constant proximity. Blake's easy laughter grated against her sharper edge. Their late-night phone calls turned into terse exchanges. The same songs that once bonded them now echoed like reminders of the gulf growing between their worlds. Miranda's next album was meant to be a love letter to this chapter of her life, but instead it became a confession. Ballads about longing, uncertainty, and heartbreak wove through the tracklist. Fans later called it the album that ended a marriage, but at the time it felt more like Miranda laying her soul bare. One song in particular, with lyrics about a girl who gave up everything to hold on to something slipping away, struck a chord. It topped the charts, but for Miranda, it was a bittersweet victory. Proof that her pain could become art, but also proof that her marriage was unraveling in real time. In August 2015, amidst rumors and tabloid speculation, Miranda and Blake announced their separation. The news hit fans like a freight train. Comments poured in. Why did they fall apart? How could country's golden couple call it quits? Behind the metal gates of their shared ranch, Miranda retreated into a silence she rarely granted herself. The outpouring of messages, from texts of concern to social media pleas, became background noise. All she could feel was the echo of her own heartbeat, the one she'd once matched so perfectly to another. The divorce was finalized months later, leaving both artists to pick up the pieces. Miranda's public composure never wavered, but cameras caught the tight clench of her jaw, the way she blinked back tears before stepping on stage. Friends whispered that she found refuge in rescued animals on her ranch: horses, pigs, and dozens of dogs. Each new life she welcomed home was a reminder that love could still exist without vows. But the ache remained, a faint hum beneath every note she sang. To confront her heartbreak head-on, Miranda poured herself into her most ambitious project yet, a double album titled The Weight of These Wings. Divided into two discs, the heart side and the pistol side, it chronicled the end of her marriage in raw, unflinching detail. Every lyric felt like a step toward closure, from confessional lines about driving away, in search of someplace new, to anthems of fierce independence. The record earned critical acclaim and swept awards circuits, yet with every trophy she accepted, Miranda's gaze carried a shadow. The awards stage offered applause, but it couldn't mend a fractured heart. Touring behind the album was both catharsis and confrontation. On big stages, she bared her pain in front of sold-out crowds, each light illuminating her vulnerability. In quieter moments, The hotel hallways, the bus rides between cities, the silence felt heavy. Panic attacks, once an occasional specter, settled in like an uninvited guest. She found herself waking in the middle of the night, her chest tight, convinced her next breath would be the last. Medical professionals recommended therapy and mindfulness exercises, but nothing erased the guilt she carried, that maybe her marriage couldn't survive because she had given the best of herself away. Yet, amid the darkness, Miranda found glimmers of hope. Late night songwriting sessions turned into odes of resilience, songs of planting new roots and standing tall when the world tried to knock her down. She leaned on her sister Amanda, whose unwavering loyalty reminded Miranda of home. Fans sent letters of encouragement, sharing stories of how Miranda's songs gave them strength in their own heartbreak. For the first time, she realized her pain had purpose. Her story could guide others through their own storms. Still, tragedy strikes in unexpected forms. In the spring of 2017, the ranch faced a near catastrophe when a violent storm swept through, destroying fences and sending beloved animals running into danger. Miranda raced into driving rain to corral her terrified horses, her boots sinking in mud. In the chaos, one mare slipped and broke her leg. Miranda held her in the mud as the vet arrived, tears mixing with rain on her cheeks. The horse survived, but the scare reminded Miranda how fragile life could be, and how easily the line between survival and loss could blur. As the dust settled on tour and storm damage lay replaced, Miranda realized that her story didn't end with sorrow. It was about resilience in the face of heartbreak, about the courage to rebuild when everything you love lies in ruins. She rewrote her narrative, one not defined by a failed marriage, but by the woman she became after. For Miranda, the aftermath of her whirlwind success came with its own heartbreak. Every new trophy in Forbes' listing felt like another echo in a life that still bore the weight of loneliness. She poured herself into her ranch, determined to build a sanctuary where she could finally catch her breath. The sunset over her pastures, golden and forgiving, became the backdrop to a fresh chapter, one defined not by heartbreak but by healing. And yet, healing proved harder than songwriting. Each sunrise found her awake before dawn, walking rows of crops or feeding her horses, her mind looping through the lyrics that once carried the sorrow she now tried to leave behind. She wondered if the muse that emerged from tragedy would stay once joy crept in. But fate had more tests ahead. In late 2018, when Miranda least expected it, her heart tumbled headlong into another romance. Country singer Anderson East, with his smoky voice and soulful eyes, entered her life through mutual friends. They met in a dimly lit Nashville bar, surrounded by the hum of slide guitars and late-night confessions. Anderson's kindness felt like a salve. He didn't rush her story or pry into old wounds. Instead, he listened with genuine empathy, sharing his own tales of loss and hope. Their early dates were low-key: coffee in the morning, vinyl shopping in Nashville's record shops, impromptu songwriting sessions in her living room. Miranda recognized the familiarity of falling fast, but this time she vowed to move with caution. Despite her better intentions, Miranda found herself answering headlines again. Rumors of an engagement swirled when she was spotted wearing a ring that wasn't on her left hand a few months into their courtship. She laughed it off at first, calling it a superstition among country artists. But late-night tabloid whispers and gossip blog splash pages chipped away at her privacy. Every candid smile in a paparazzi shot felt like a negotiation between truth and image. Anderson, unaccustomed to the frailties of country fame, struggled to navigate the spotlight that shone brighter when he was with Miranda. The couple faced their first public test at the Grammy nominations, where Miranda and Anderson walked the red carpet together, arms entwined. Photographers pressed for a kiss, fans held their breath, and Miranda realized that even in love, tragedy lingers in the shadows of expectation. It was weeks before Christmas when tragedy struck again. On a frigid night in December 2019, a fire broke out in her Nashville home, her safe haven. Flames raced through the guest house where she stored old guitars and notebooks filled with lyrics scraped from her childhood. Panic clawed at her chest as firefighters worked to contain the blaze. She stood on her porch in boots and pajamas, watching the orange glow consume pages she had kept for years. Among the embers, the journals that mapped her emotional journey from heartache to healing disintegrated into ash. In an instant, a tangible record of her growth. A road map marked with blood, sweat, and tears vanished. The loss felt symbolic, as if the fire was a cruel reminder that grief and joy exist in the same volatile mixture. In the aftermath, Miranda faced a familiar crossroads. She could retreat into despair, mourning the physical remnants of her history, or she could write an entirely new account. True to form, she channeled the shock into art. Her next single, released in the spring of 2020, carried the title, Ashes to Beauty. It opened with a hushed piano, then built into a glitching electric guitar riff that sounded like sparks against metal. The chorus lifted the story from flames to rebirth. When the fire burns the pages clean, your story starts again. Critics hailed it as her most daring work yet, a raw chronicle of loss, resilience, and the courage to begin anew. Yet as Ashes to Beauty soared up the charts, the solitude of rewriting her life weighed heavier. Touring was on hiatus thanks to the world's troubles. Empty arenas replaced roaring crowds. She spent weeks on end in her Nashville bedroom, surrounded by mementos of the past she nearly lost and reminders of what she had overcome. Anderson stood by her, patient and unwavering, even as the specter of the fire crept into her dreams. She found herself waking in the dead of night, driven by the fear that she'd lose yet another piece of herself. But each time she rose, she reminded herself that fire could be both destroyer and creator. Without those burned pages, she saw space to write fresh chapters, ones that began with hope rather than hurt. Miranda realized that sometimes true tragedy can become the real foundation for lasting transformation. With her spirits buoyed by the ashes of the past, Miranda began to rebuild not only her home, but her own sense of self. The ranch that had once felt like a gilded cage now offered a fresh horizon. She leased new pastures, installed solar panels to make the homestead sustainable, and repurposed the charred guesthouse into a song sanctuary, its walls adorned with guitars and lyric fragments recovered from memory. She dreamed again of bigger dreams. She felt renewed determination. Professionally, she faced another crossroads. The music industry was shifting beneath her feet. Streaming services replaced album releases, radio playlists lost their gatekeeping power, and the once ultimate prize of a platinum record began to feel antiquated. Labels no longer invested in long-term artist development, they chased instant viral hits. Miranda's fierce independence and preference for storytelling clashed with executives who demanded earworm production. She sat in virtual meetings during the pandemic lockdowns, her video feed framed by acoustic guitars and hay bales, nodding at pitches that promised trending metrics but ignored emotional depth. She could see the numbers ticking up when she submitted a pop-infused demo, but her heart resisted. The call came: adapt or be left behind. That ultimatum stung more than any heartbreak. But instead of compromising her artistry, Miranda made a bold declaration. She founded her own label, dubbed Velvet Steel Records, a tribute to her southern grit and velvet voice. With that decision, she reclaimed control over her catalog, her image, and her creative destiny. She assembled a team of trusted indie partners, engineers, photographers, publicists, people who had witnessed her journey from small-town hopeful to global icon. Together, they mapped out a release strategy that bypassed traditional channels, surprise digital drops at midnight, exclusive listening sessions for her mailing list, intimate livestream performances from the barn-turned studio. Miranda's first independent single, Wildflower, was a sparse acoustic track celebrating resilience in bloom. It entered the top 5 on country charts within days. Critics praised its honesty, and long-time listeners felt vindicated. She had stayed true to the mandate she'd given herself so many years ago. She followed with an EP of covers, hand-picked songs that shaped her own artistry, including a haunting rendition of Patsy Cline's I Fall to Pieces, and an unlikely piano duet of Fiona Apple's Fast as You Can. These reinterpretations showcased her range and her willingness to blur genre lines. The EP became one of the most streamed country releases that quarter, proving that authenticity could still break through algorithmic noise. As Miranda's independent path flourished, her public image evolved into something more than country music royalty. She became an advocate for causes that mattered to her: animal welfare, wildfire prevention, mental health awareness. She hosted benefit concerts on her ranch, funneling ticket sales and auction proceeds to local nonprofits. During one summer barbecue event in 2021, she stood on a makeshift stage under string lights, introducing young musicians from Texas public schools. The crowd cheered not just for her voice, but for the generosity that grounded her celebrity. Cameras captured genuine smiles as she passed the mic to a shy teenager whose face lit up with pride. In those moments, the tragedy of her earlier years felt like a prologue, and her present purpose shone brighter than any spotlight. Yet private struggles still surrounded her. She maintained a tight circle, wary of false friends and sycophants. Rumors flared from time to time, speculations about another marriage, whispers about turning recluse. Miranda offered few confirmations, replying on social media only when it felt necessary, crafting each statement with precision. She confessed in an interview that fame could feel like standing in a room full of echoes. You hear yourself too often, and the original voice gets lost in distortion. She guarded her emotional well-being through daily journaling and therapy sessions, practices rooted in lessons she'd learned during her darkest days. That vulnerability, selectively shared, became part of her authenticity and endeared her further to fans who felt seen in their own struggles. Her latest industry milestone came when she earned a Grammy nomination for Best Country Album as an independent artist, a feat unheard of just a decade earlier. As she sat in the electric atmosphere of the awards ceremony, surrounded by sleek gowns and polished performances, she felt a calm confidence. She had moved from the front seat to the driver's seat of her career. When the winner was announced, it wasn't her name, yet her smile never faltered. Backstage, she raised a glass with her team, toasting partnership, perseverance, and a refusal to let tragedy dictate her story. The narrative she'd forged, one of heartbreak, resilience, reinvention, was now written in every line she sang. Miranda's world tilted again in 2022 when Pat McDonald, her longtime steel guitarist and confidante, was found unresponsive in his hotel room after a show. Red, the musician who had whispered harmony lines backstage since her Nashville arrival, was more than a bandmate. He was a living link to her earliest days of hope. Standing under the venue's harsh lights while producers slid condolence notes offstage, Miranda felt as if her past and present had collided. She dedicated the next song to her fallen friend, her voice trembling with raw grief and forging an unbreakable link between her sorrow and every chord she strummed. The audience, united in mourning, turned her pain into collective catharsis. Word spread quickly, and tabloids wasted no time speculating on her state of mind. Headlines screamed that Miranda was spiraling, with rumors of rehab stints and suicidal ideation. Instead of retreating, she issued a candid video statement, the first time she publicly addressed her mental health. Dressed in a simple tee with truth in her tone, she confessed that grief had brought her to therapy for the first time in years. Her admission, shared in a virtual town hall that drew thousands, became a rallying cry. Fans praised her vulnerability, mental health advocates lauded her bravery, and the narrative shifted. This was an artist pushing through pain, not collapsing under it. As she began to breathe again, natural disaster struck. A sudden flood recast her family's cattle ranch as a drowned landscape. Fences floated like driftwood, barns sat awash in murky water, and the fields that once teemed with life felt bereft. Miranda flew in immediately, wading knee-deep through debris to tend to stranded livestock. Her phone streamed images of flattened hay bales and mud-caked houses, each snapshot a reminder of how quickly security can erode. Yet instead of letting despair anchor her, she launched a fundraising campaign, auctioning handwritten lyrics and vintage boots to assist neighbors in rebuilding. Within weeks, the community heal turned into hope, one donated dollar at a time. Miranda channeled these twin catastrophes into her next album, Redemption Road, released in spring 2023. Critics hailed it as her most daring work, a double album split between raw loss and rising power. Tracks like Midwest Rain captured the hush before a storm and Reclaim the Land throbbed with hands in the dirt intensity. The album's artwork, a silhouette of Miranda against an awakening dawn, visually echoed the narrative arc Darkness Yields Dawn. When the record swept major award nominations, she recognized that the tragedies that threatened to crush her had instead fueled her artistry. Touring behind Redemption Road tested her again. In Kansas City, midway through River's Edge, Miranda's voice cracked under a wave of grief. She paused, wiping tears, then spoke truth. Your grief is mine and my grief is yours. The crowd erupted, transforming the show into an emblem of communal healing. Night after night, stadiums became places of shared renewal, reminding Miranda why she embraced her craft despite its risks. Each thunderous cheer after her rawest songs affirmed that tragedy, when laid bare, could become a bridge between artist and audience. Through all of this, Miranda's relationship with Anderson East remained the steady anchor she'd seldom allowed herself. Their spring 2024 elopement on her ranch, vows exchanged at sunrise among dew-kissed pastures, remained a private promise supported by only her sister, Amanda, and Anderson's childhood friend, a gathering that mirrored the intimacy she prized. No photographers, no press, just two voices united in resolve. When the news reached fans later, they celebrated the shielded joy that grew from tragedy's lessons. For Miranda, privacy no longer felt like an isolating fortress, but a choice that nurtured love's growth. In an age of public spectacle, her decision to wed away from cameras became its own statement, one of agency, trust, and the belief that some stories should unfold in silence. It felt deeply restorative, a reprieve from relentless public life. Miranda's voice, once forged in the fire of youth and shaped by loss, had grown into medicine for others. She opened her barn studio to aspiring writers, hosting monthly workshops where she taught them to mine truth from pain, to let vulnerability fuel melody rather than fear. A documentary team trailed her through these sessions, onstage performances, and solitary moments in dawn-lit fields, capturing her unguarded laughter and tears as she coaxed raw emotion into song. These quieter scenes revealed that artistry and tragedy lived in a seamless continuum, a single heartbeat pulsing between sorrow and strength. Now, as she prepared to launch her next independent EP, audiences understood that Miranda Lambert's story was not a cautionary tale, but an anthem of survival, proof that even the deepest wounds can give rise to true beauty. Now, as Miranda prepares to unveil her next independent EP, she stands at a crossroads that feels both familiar and brand new. The journey from that modest farmhouse to world stages has been marked by heartbreak and triumph, by the raw alchemy of turning pain into melody. Her voice, once a beacon in lonely barns and neon-lit honky-tonks, now carries the weight of every scar and every healing moment. Behind the scenes, she has spent late nights crafting songs that speak to roots and resilience, to love that endures beyond scars and fires and floods. In these melodies, she invites listeners to join her at the edge of possibility, where wounds can become wings. Like a wildflower pushing through cracked concrete, Miranda has found beauty in places others might overlook. She remembers how fate once conscripted her story into tragedy. The storms and fires that threatened to erase her past. The lonely nights when applause felt hollow. And yet through each loss, she discovered a deeper well of creative strength. Today, she draws from that well, weaving memoir and melody into an EP that promises to be her most candid and confessional. Over 6 tracks, she charts a personal renaissance. From solemn piano ballads about loss to up-tempo anthems of renewal. She sings of rebuilding fences on the ranch and reweaving the tapestry of friendships frayed by distance and time. Her lyrics pulse with imagery that feels tactile. I held the mirror up to my own reflection, she croons, and found an entire world in my own eyes. Through such lines, Miranda reminds us that tragedy, though uninvited, can become an ally, guiding us towards self-discovery and purpose. In tandem with the release, she plans a series of intimate live-stream concerts, broadcasting from her barn-turned-studio. With only a handful of cameras, she aims to bridge the gap between artist and audience, inviting fans into the very spaces where her songs were born. On stage, she will share stories of heartbreak beside the guitar she used at age 13, of triumph sung over old speakers that first carried her voice beyond county lines. These live streams are more than mere performances, they're communal ceremonies in which every click and comment becomes part of the narrative, a shared thread in a tapestry of healing. Looking further ahead, Miranda envisions a traveling residency that marries music with activism. She imagines pop-up songwriting sessions at wildfire relief camps, acoustic sets in shelters for mental health retreats, and collaborative workshops with survivors of natural disasters. Through each stop, she intends to donate a portion of proceeds to local recovery efforts, forging a legacy that transcends album sales and award trophies. In Miranda's vision, every chord struck and verse sung becomes a bridge between art and action, turning private struggle into collective empowerment. At the heart of Miranda's story is a reminder that resilience is not a destination, but an ongoing journey. Teenage contests in Texas school gyms to Grammy stages where her independent spirit shone, she has exemplified the power of remaining true to one's own voice. Each tragedy has added layers to her artistry, making every chorus richer and every refrain more poignant. As fans gear up to stream her new EP, they do more than press play. They bear witness to a woman who refused to be defined by her darkest hours and who found in every setback the seeds of her greatest songs. As the lights dim and the first chords of Miranda's new EP fill your speakers, remember that every note carries a story of survival, of loss transformed into legacy. She stands before you not as a distant superstar, but as a fellow traveler in life's unpredictable odyssey. Someone who has walked through flames and floods, who has stitched broken pieces of her world back together with threads of melody, and who invites you to sing alongside her, to add your own verse to the song of resilience we all share. When the final note fades, let your heart carry